In 2006, Ashley Williams started teaching at the new Southwest Baltimore Charter School. It was here that she first recognized the importance of social and emotional learning for students and teachers confronting more than just the stress and challenges within their classrooms.
Students need relationship. That's the very first thing. As a teacher, when you walk into the classroom, you're bringing all of that information that you learned at university. You're bringing science, pedagogy, you're bringing lesson planning, but none of that matters unless you can look a student in the eye and connect to their heart.
How would you define social emotional development and mindfulness?
It's a good question. So social-emotional learning, emotional intelligence is most often defined as the ability to sort of monitor your own emotional experience, to identify what you're experiencing, I'm having this emotional experience, and to also recognize the patterns and behaviors that result because of the emotional experience that you have identified with. And then the third thing is to be able to move through whatever emotional experience shows up.
Principal Joseph Eldridge describes why these skills are so important for students who are struggling to learn amidst historic levels of anxiety and depression.
There's a lot of stress in coming into a room and not knowing anything, and that's how students come into the room every day. They don't know what we're going to teach them, especially if we're introducing something new. So social emotional learning gives students that kind of, it's a tool for them to use when they get anxious or overwhelmed. It helps them to identify and navigate through their emotions and how they exist in the environment and with their peers.
Instead of reacting when somebody steps on my shoe with violence, I've developed new pathways through the practice daily of meditation, of mindfulness. I can choose another choice. I can take a deep breath and say, hey, you know what? Things happen. This is not personal.
While its value is understood, a gap still exists between the acknowledged need for social and emotional learning and the teacher's limited capacity to implement it.
Teachers, 93% of teachers believe that socio-emotional learning is as important as academic learning, but only 22% of them feel prepared to teach it. So there's a huge gap. Schools are already doing things to teach socio-emotional learning, but the people, the stakeholders who are responsible for distributing that content to young people don't feel empowered because a math teacher is not a mindfulness instructor. A math teacher is a math teacher.
The teachers are really running the program. They're essential to the program, and because they're essential to the program and on the front lines, it's important that we equip teachers to be able to give, not only to be able to give students that social emotional toolkit that they need, but also to build our teachers' social emotional toolkit.
Ashley described one of the fundamental barriers to teaching social and emotional education.
It goes back to like their training. They're not prepared to teach it for their young people. They're also not prepared to practice self-care as a teacher. All they're taught is pedagogy. They're taught pedagogy. So it's a huge component missing from the structure of teaching in the United States, period.
What will it take to effectively scale social and emotional learning in our classrooms?
A lot of the times when we are implementing these curriculums, we leave it to the teacher to teach it. Where do I fit this in? So we have to create the space during a day from a cultural standpoint. Like, this is our culture as a school.
The most important thing is a principal can do, I would say, is dedicate time to it. Like, be intentional about the time you spend on mindfulness and social emotional learning.
If we had to realign our priorities and make the social emotional learning a higher priority, what would that look like?
I noticed that the teachers felt like it was one more thing to do in a sea of things to do. I noticed that, it wasn't always engaging for young people to engage and learn about mindfulness and emotional intelligence. So that led me to leave to sort of contemplate an answer to those problems. And out of that, Infinite Focus Schools was born.
A little earlier, you talked about some of the barriers that our students and our teachers have to getting support for social and emotional learning or mindfulness training. How does Infinite Focus Schools break down those barriers?
It's a good question. So Infinite Focus Schools is an emotional health platform for young people. We teach them how to monitor and self-reflect on their emotional experiences and how to move through them. And so we make it really easy to do that. A lot of the times a teacher complains, like, where do I fit this into my busy day? We deliver the content in less than 10 minutes a day. All the teacher has to do is press play. There's absolutely no additional burden placed on our teachers who utilize our platform, one. The second thing is that our kids are able to take that platform home with them. So if I'm at home and I'm not feeling well, or if I'm experiencing anger, if I'm experiencing fear, if I'm experiencing anxiety, I have coping skills that I can carry around in my pocket to utilize.
Your love for your students and for your colleagues as teachers is really apparent. How does their voice continue to influence the evolution of Infinite Focus schools?
Yeah, so this process the product itself came out of design thinking. Everything that this product was born because a teacher said something, because a student said something, whether it was verbally or non-verbally. It's this process of listening. So that doesn't change now that we have a product that we can sell. Right? So now we're listening more intently. What features would you like to see? What functionalities would you like to see? How do you want to utilize this platform? What is most effective and efficient for you? And we take that feedback from our users, and we're constantly refining and iterating our product.
As Ashley left her successful career to launch Infinite Focus schools, she learned firsthand about the barriers that Black women face when trying to secure the capital to finance a new venture.
As far as VC funding is concerned, we don't exist. Now, I didn't know that. I do know that inequity exists in this country. I do know that I'm a woman of African descent in this country, so I could make certain assumptions about what the barriers and expectations would be when I entered this field. So through this process for me, there's been a lot of no's. There's a trail of no's behind me, but I've utilized those no's like a ladder.
Why is it that you think you get so many no's? Is it easier for somebody to say no to a woman of color who's an entrepreneur, or is it easier for somebody to say no who's working in that social space?
Traditionally, people are just not used to funding Black women. That is a pattern. In the same way we can have within us the pattern of anger in operation, we can have a pattern of not seeing people clearly through generations. So that's a pattern that I have to confront every time I go into a room. I'm dealing with that pattern. My lesson for funders who are white or not white, but who operate within this paradigm of white supremacy in the United States, is to do your work. Don't ask me to do your work or to teach you about systemic racism or about that 0.27% of Black women who get funding, because the statistics, the facts are there. Open your eyes and see. You have to do your work by confronting within yourself whatever feels like resistance to what is, to the facts, of Black excellence, of Black talent. It's here, it's in this city. Baltimore is so talented. There's so much talent in Baltimore City. Give those people with talent the resources to do the work, and stop telling us what we need to do so that you feel prepared to do the work, because we know what our work is, and the rest of that has to come from the other party.
So the first step then is recognition, acceptance, and accountability.
Absolutely. You have to own what you're doing, and in order to own it, you have to be able to see it. I can't make you see. You have to be able to have the self-reflective ability to say, hey, I'm not seeing clearly. I'm showing up to this meeting, the way that I'm assessing this talent, whether it's a Black woman, a Latino woman, a Native American woman, an Indigenous woman, Indigenous man, whatever it may be. You have to understand that you're bringing with you into that space all of the things that you collected along the way, and you're speaking to them through all of the things that you collected along the way.
What is the return on investment of an organization like Infinite Focus Schools for the children, for the teachers, but then certainly the neighborhoods that they're living in and the neighborhoods that those schools are in?
Well, one of the benefits that we see through years of study from people who have high emotional intelligence is that they have higher lifetime earnings, one. So just think about what could happen at economic infusion to a community like this. Think about what could happen if we create more community in terms of not just a neighborhood, but actual community relationships between people in a neighborhood like this. Another thing is that when we talk about social emotional learning, I don't like to always put the need for it on the people of the community. Our politicians could utilize emotional intelligence for sure. Our church leaders could could utilize emotional intelligence for sure. There's not really a human on this planet who can't benefit from understanding themselves and their relationship with the people around them to be more empathetic, more understanding, have less stress.
Ashley also spoke about the role that personal investments had on her success as an entrepreneur and on the motivation to continue her work every day.
So I have an amazing network of people. So an investment of ideas, an investment of time, an investment of belief. I believe in you. I believe in this idea. You can do it. I've had that. It took me quite a long time to get the capital, but guess what? I got the capital. And that's because I gave myself the permission to continue forward, even when it was really challenging, even when it felt impossible, even when another door was closed in my face. I had to ask myself, what's the best next step forward? And it's just been this process. When I resigned from my job, I said, look, I'm gonna take a leap. I'm either going to fall or I'm gonna fly, but I'm gonna give myself permission to go. I mean, the reason that I do this is because I wanna be helpful. Somebody helped me. Somebody taught me how to self-reflect, how to evaluate, how to live a life, how to show up as kindness, as empathy, as understanding, as perseverance, as grace, you know? Somebody taught me how to do that. They saw that in me. So I want to share that with as many young people as possible.
Ashley concluded with a compelling vision for the growth of her idea that began right here in Southwest Baltimore.
This product will one day be in Kenya, in Swahili. Kids in Argentina will be utilizing this in Spanish. It will crisscross the planet wherever they are, and our goal is really just to be helpful and to help our young people live the lives that they deserve and to not feel handicapped or confined by normal human circumstances.